All right, everybody, listen. Welcome, everyone. This is a new season of the Speak Black Man podcast. I have to say, we were all in the background mesmerized by the new intro videos, which is super dope. Maybe not as long next time, but it was super dope and super excited to be back. Listen, I am your host, Jason B. Allen, better known as Professor JBA. This is season 6 of Speak Black Man, the podcast. Now, listen, go ahead and subscribe to what you will hear me refer to as ETV, which is our YouTube channel at educationalentities.com. I'm going to go ahead and say right now, by the end of the month, we want to have 100 new subscribers to the ETV channel because the students with the No Cap Zone podcast will be back on this Wednesday. Of course, the Speak Black Man podcast is back now. I know everyone is asking the big question, where is the I Win morning show? And I promise you all, it is coming back soon. So listen, again, welcome back to another amazing season of the Speak Black Man podcast. I can tell you that on the break, I have been doing some phenomenal things like writing book 3, which will definitely connect to the No Cap Zone and Students for Equity group. All about the A-Team developing student leadership and engaging in school turnaround work with student leaders, which is something that we need right now to help us improve our schools. So this is your welcome and introduction. If this is your first time, please make sure you like and share this conversation with others through our YouTube channel or on any platform that you are watching live on. Now, we are doing something new with the podcast this season, and before I get to Jay's Corner, I want to go ahead and open up with community power. So we are about 5 minutes into the show, and I'm not going to hold you long, but here are some upcoming events to help us build community and power together. I want to make sure that you're connected this week. I will be speaking on a gun safety and gun control panel, and let me tell you right now, it's going to be phenomenal. Alongside me will be Senator Parks from District 7, as well as Patsy Gatson from the Gwinnett County District Attorney Office. So this will be held on tomorrow, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Center, 75 Langley Drive, Lawrenceville, Georgia. Again, gun safety and gun control panel. This will be held at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Center, 75 Langley Drive, Lawrenceville, Georgia, tomorrow, September 17th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. So, Georgia, if you are concerned about what just happened recently, with actually people are only aware of one mass school shooting, but there were several school shootings here in the state of Georgia. If you did not know that, I'm glad you are connected to the conversation on this evening, because we are gathering parents and community members to have a real conversation around gun safety and gun control on tomorrow. So make sure you show up for that. On Wednesday, the students will be back at 7:15 p.m., but also the National Parents Union will be having an amazing kickoff for our North Carolina Parent Week of Action. It is going to be phenomenal. I can tell you right now, we're going to be addressing school safety, innovation in schools, and also the teacher pipeline. What does this look like for the future, and how does this impact Black people? Make sure you get connected to that on all of our social media pages, and more information about the activities coming up for that. Last announcement, State of the Grandparents report is coming out officially on September 19th through Generations United, also with the U.S. Department of Ed and the National Parents Union. I will be moderating that conversation at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, but also 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we want to make sure that you get connected to these conversations. This is community power, and again, we cannot build if we're not doing it together for the people, and that is why we come together and have these discussions, to make sure that we're doing it for the people. Now, I'm excited about the conversation this evening. This is the premiere of season 6. Everything is new, from the background to the music, to, again, the intro that was super dope. But on tonight, we are talking about school safety and gun violence. violence that spills over from the community into our schools. I want to give us some data. Now, I got to say this, it's important. Before I bring on our speaker, a lot of people have these platforms that they're talking. But I try to tell people that you have to study to show yourself approved, that we need research. We need data, but we also need programming. Like, what are you actually doing for the people in the streets? Listen, before I give some data, the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education has their top 10 issues to watch in 2024. Now, I'm connecting the dots because I was talking about gun safety and gun control, and I want to tell you a real dynamic here in Georgia. Our number 3 issue outside of improving schools and literacy is student mental health. If we think we have seen the last of massive school shootings in Georgia, we are wrong, because we already had data showing that, hey, we have a lot of students, especially from the pandemic, that are suffering from some severe mental illnesses and challenges, and we should be embedding this within our schools. So before we move forward in anything, I want to make sure that you guys know that anything you hear from the Speak Black Man podcast is coming from things that we can prove that are true, right? We're giving you facts here because there's a lot of false data. The great brother that I'm bringing on this evening is no stranger to our platform, but also, again, it's coming with research and data. And this is why I want all brothers, sisters, whoever is listening to me right now, get people connected to this conversation, because we're going to be touching on some data from 2 very important places. One, I can tell you right here, you can see that seal. It says the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, bringing data of what they're doing, but also how they're collaborating with us in the streets and in the school districts, because there are a lot of false narratives around, hey, I shouldn't vote because we don't need a U.S. Department of Education. But we actually do, especially when we're thinking about gun safety and the safety of our students in schools. Now, last piece of research before I bring on our guest, 2 things. You already probably have an idea of who is getting ready to come on. But these documents that have research in them, dynamics of Atlanta Black dads, of course, we're starting off the season centering male and fatherhood engagement. I'm going to go on ahead and make sure we bring on our guest for the evening, the good brother Kenneth Braswell, representing Fathers Inc. Now, Kenneth, you are no stranger to the Speak Black Man podcast. I'm honored to have you on because your work is a pivotal part of something I mentioned a few moments ago, which is our National Parents Union, North Carolina Parent Week of Action. So before we get started, I want you to allow us to know a little bit more about you for those who are new to the podcast. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and some of the dynamic work of Fathers Inc. and so many other things that you're doing.
Oh my goodness, man! Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for having me, Professor JBA. It's funny because I saw that when I was sitting in the green room, and I was like, I don't know if I've ever called him Professor JBA, but I'm gonna be calling you that from now on, sir. And so, if I go through my resume, we be here. We won't get to the critical conversation. What you need to know about me is I'm a servant. I've been a servant all my life, and I have attempted throughout my life to be available for anyone in the sphere of my ability to focus on their needs, specifically in our community and with our families and with our parents and with our children. I am unapologetically Black. I have the bandwidth and ability to do a lot of things, to talk to a lot of people. I've had a lot of life, and so I can do the broadband stuff. But when I look at, what's happening with our people, which is why I love, Speak Black Man podcast, is because it allows me to narrow in on speaking specifically to the thing that I know best. I always say that there are 2 things in my resume that is undisputed. 1, I'm a man, and B, I'm Black. And so I can speak to both of those things with a lot of knowledge behind us. But I am the CEO of Fathers Incorporated here in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you need to know anything more about that, as the young folks say, just Google me.
I love that. Listen, I want to start with the importance of civic engagement. And again, we don't even have to beat around the bush. One of the reasons why I wanted to start off this season with you is because There is a major, major, major agenda to attack black men in America. A lot of misinformation, especially around civic engagement. Listen, legitimation is a big issue for fathers across this nation. Your organization is doing phenomenal things. The reason why I showed this document is because, again, a lot of people say, "Man, I see them talking and they having good conversations." But I also want to say we're out here doing the work, and there is research, there is data that proves what we do. So, with that being said, Kenneth, a lot of brothers, a lot of men are saying, "I'm not voting. There's no point in voting. We're better off with Trump, etc., so forth." And I keep referencing your report and this comprehensive guide for unmarried fathers and their rights to their children, the importance of having men involved in early childhood development, but also a lot of things connected to paternal rights. There is a candidate that has done work currently with an organization, the U.S. Department of Education, that is working to help make your work and your organization's work more profound, but also more impactful for so many hundreds of fathers who need this. I'm giving everybody this context because I want you to give us your perspective, but also the urgency around why we need brothers, men of every race to really have accurate information around this election season, and also for them to understand that it's not just the presidential election, but when we're looking at state to state, the rights of men who want to get connected to their kids or actually have full custody of their kids or whatever that may look like, those laws are impacted by people who we elect locally, and we do have people that are going to be voted on in November. So, long, but I want to give you the time again to speak to the work of Fathers Inc. in regards to some of the policy things around paternal rights, which is a major issue for men in this country, but also maybe helping connect the dots for people and understanding why they need to get out and be voting.
Man, that's a lot. I'm gonna try to step back because there's a couple of things that I want to say, about why it has been so important for me to focus specifically on black men and more specifically black fathers. And I can always ask the question, listen, how far you want me to go back in this thing? Because this thing didn't just start during this presidential election. This thing happened on our journey, if you want to call that, from the motherland here. And so if you go back to the Willie Lynch letters, it was about breaking the back, spirit, and emotion of black men. Because what they understood and what they knew, if they could do that, our women would be vulnerable and our children would be controllable. And that has been the plan, the master plan, no pun intended, from way back when. And if you look at everything that we've tried to deal with for the last 400 and some odd years, from George Frazier, who runs PowerNet in Detroit. I believe that's where Dr. Frazier's from. I met him some years ago, and we had a lot of conversations about the work that we needed to do for our community. And he said that as black people in this country, we had 3 imperatives. And he said the first one was freedom. And he says that every black person in this country understood that the number one goal for black people was freedom, to become free. And within that particular movement, a lot of people did a lot of things focused on that one thing. Harriet Tubman did it her way. Nat Turner did it his way. Frederick Douglass did it his way. And you can go on the list on and on and on to everybody who understood what it was, and they got in where they fit in. The second imperative was civil rights and equal rights. And so when you get to the civil rights movement, everybody didn't have to do one thing, but they did have to have one purpose. And that was equal rights. And Martin Luther King did it his way. Malcolm X did it that way. The Panthers did it their way, and all of our leaders in our community did it their way, but they knew that we had to get to one thing. The third one, he said, was economic empowerment. I think we're still in the middle of that. And the reason that we're still in the middle of that is because we don't have the one goal. Everybody knows that prosperity is important, that legacy is important, but we haven't come together to kind of talk about and think about how do we as a people come together and amass all of the talents we have, the goals that we have for our people, to really begin to move ourselves in spaces and garner the power that we need to uplift not only ourselves as Black men and Black women, but uplift ourselves for our children. I believe that there's a fourth one, and we haven't gotten to the fourth one yet. And it lands right where we are, Professor. It is family stability. I believe that the initial attack was at the family, and we have lost sight on how important it is to stabilize our family, and that it is really important for us to now turn ourselves towards each other and talk more about how we can support each other. Now I'm talking about men and women. So I want ladies listening to me and I want men listening to me. We have to be able to sit in the same room, support each other, but lift and empower each other at the same time. The empowerment of us separately can't be a zero sum total. It can't be that I support you to the detriment of me, right? It has to be in partnership where I am supporting you in your needs, and at the same time, you are supporting me in mine, and we're building together for the sake of our children. To me, it's very simple. And when we talk about legitimation, just to bring it all the way to where we are, it was part of the plan. Georgia is the only state in the Americas that an unmarried father has to go to two processes to become the legal parent of his child. First is an administrative one, and the administrative one is where they establish paternity. And as a result of establishing paternity, he could be responsible for child support. But the second one, which is a legal process to which he has to go through superior court to gain authority to be the legal father of his child, has to go through a legal process, which means that to get there, he has to do legal things. He has to hire a lawyer, or he has to do per se, and he has to do all of the things to do in order to get that. You're talking about a population that don't have the means, and if it's non-contested, it takes about 6 months to get through. But if it is contested, then he has to go get a lawyer. The sad part, when there is a mom who contests the dad legitimating his children, is it always boils down to emotion. I'm mad at him because of X. I'm mad at her because of X. And I don't want you to have access to your children because I have translated how they term what is happening to win and losses. It is why when we go to court as couples and come out, there is one person who says I win and another person who says I lost. Neither one of us, a mom or a dad, wants to walk out of a court and be told that they lost their children, because the only one who really loses in this scenario is children. There's a benefit to children becoming legitimized, and there's a long list of benefits that also take place as a result of fathers having legal access. And when I say legal access to custody and access to parenting time. Custody is very critical, right? Because custody includes all of the responsibilities that fathers are on demand to be responsible for, right? So we want them to be engaged. We want them to be present. We want them to go to school. We want them to help them with homework. We want them to take them to the doctors. We want them to do X. We want them to do Y. We want them to do Z. I shouldn't have to do that through a gatekeeper that keeps me hostage because of our emotional feelings between each other. If the goal as two parents, right, is to I'm seeing Marissa's question and she just threw me off, but I will get to that piece right there. If the goal of two parents is to take care of their child, then both parents have to have equal access to do that fully in that space. Now, you could be mad, he could have cheated, we know the emotional things, we've all gone through the emotional things, but for the sake of our children, we have to find a way, lest there is any control or abuse involved. When it's that, then we got to cut it. We got to cut the line until that is resolved. But less those two things, there is absolutely no reason for both parents to have equal access to a child. When it comes to Marissa, when it comes to the birth certificate, is funny because this weekend I was doing some stuff because I'm writing this whole paper on conceptually how do we go after eradicating legitimation in the state of Georgia. I went and I found that DFACS had revised the acknowledgement for paternity in February of 2024. And my mind was like, wait a minute, why are they revising this form? I thought this form was no longer in operation, that fathers couldn't sign the acknowledgement of paternity in the hospital. Then when I read the back in the instructions, that's where I got the reality. The reality is they can still sign that form, but the only thing it does is establish paternity so that a child support order can be leaned against them. And it makes it very clear because there's a bold line on the back of the acknowledgement of paternity that says, let's be clear, in order to have parental rights and custody, you still have to go through the legitimation process. And that's that small print that they put in the back of things that if you don't read it, you don't know where you're going. And Professor JBA, you said something that I love that you said, because it's like, follow the small print. Don't get bamboozled by not paying attention to what you're reading behind these things. You gotta be up on the process. And this process, again, is destroying Black families, right? And so 2 pieces of statistics, because I like numbers, and then I'm going to lean for you to give me more directions. First one is, in this country, 85% of low-income couples are still romantically engaged at the birth of their child.
Very true.
85%. What that means is there's a honeymoon period, right? Everybody is good. Big mama is letting him sleep on the couch. Everybody's buying the baby diapers. Everybody is cooing and oohing and eyeing, and everybody feels good, good, good. The statistics then say that after 1 year, there's no noticeable difference between the engagement of a non-married father and a married father, which means that the relationship and the good time is still rolling along. It's a year from now. Ain't nobody putting no pressure on no one. He ain't getting pressure to go to work. He ain't getting pressure to do this. She's not getting pressure to babysit. Ain't no pressure, no pressure, no pressure. At 5 years, there was little to no contact between the non-married father and their child. So what happens in years 2, 3, and 5 that causes this disconnect? What causes the disconnect is life be lifing, because the child had to find a doctor, and because he wasn't legit, because the child's not legitimated, he can't take the child to the doctor. The child has to be enrolled into a school. Because he's not primary guardian, he can't be enrolled in a school. All of these things happen, and now the relationship is breaking down because he ain't working. Now she goes to child support. She has a child support up against him, and now he's upset. Now they're arguing. Now the relationship is broken down. Now he gets in trouble, and he has an incarcerated issue on his background, and the family starts to deteriorate. And all of this happens pre the child entering elementary school. So our Black and brown children, family dynamics are breaking down from a process, law, and policy in the state of Georgia before they get into school. And then the rest of the story tells itself. By 3rd grade, they're not making proficiency levels, and it's a pipeline to where? Prison, particularly for our boys. And it leaves less boys to be healthy men for our girls. I'm a father of girls. I am very concerned that my daughters are not going to be able to easily find a husband, right? That's an issue for me. But when I roll back and I look at how we got here, the writing has been on the wall for 400 and some odd years of our existence here in this thing we call America.
Very
I know you
true.
ain't asked for all that, but I wanted to
No,
give
that
the
was
backdrop to pull
listen.
it all the
That
way
was
up.
question 1, 2, and 3 everywhere. And let me tell you, people are really like tuning in and giving comments. So I really appreciate that. And I also want to again just remind everyone the comprehensive guide for unmarried fathers. And I'm telling you, for anyone that is saying I'm sitting out this election, I'm not going to be locally engaged. Civic engagement locally is how we begin to make these changes. Now, let me tell you, for all those who know men and brothers who are like, hey, I'm not voting, I'm not I'm not going to be engaged. I also will go on a limb and say this. I have studied both policies of all of the candidates. And I will tell you, for the Democratic candidate, again, from information that I know from working with this entity right here, the U.S. Department of Education, they are very in tune with ensuring that support that Kenneth has spoken to is going forward and moving forward for American working families, especially fathers who are wanting to be connected to their kids. I also will tell you, from the previous administration, if you really think that this notion of eliminating the Department of Education and other departments is a farce, I'm telling you, it has happened before. And this is a major area, children and families, that is going to be impacted. And now maybe that will help uncover the veil of why men specifically are being honed in on for this election and being talked out of not going to vote. This is beyond just the president. This election is very important, like all of them, because we have very important key political positions in our states that are coming up for grabs. Right now, let me tell you the consequences of failing to legitimate a child, which connect to the failure of not going to vote this season. The first failure is this: the inability to seek custody or visitation rights. That's already a struggle. Let me also say that the U.S. Department of Education plays a role in this. Why? Because I'm going to read it again. Inability to seek custody or visitation rights. That's at home and where? At school. Okay, so when we hear things like, hey, you shouldn't be voting because the U.S. Department of Education doesn't work for you, it does work for fathers that have to go through that route, that cannot visit or see their children at home or at school, and they're getting the rights at home, but they also have to fight to get the rights at school. So this is already laid out in this report. I know that there's a question about where we can get that. I'm going to let Brother Kenneth speak to that more, but I also want to go to this. Lack of legal authority to make decisions. I'm gonna start that back over. Lack of legal authority. Who has legal authority? The government, the entity that we vote elected officials to. So, men, when you are hearing ads, when you are seeing strategic campaigns to say you should sit out this election, you should not vote, I'm telling you, it will impact you locally when you are trying to seek custody for your children. B, you are trying to get legal authority and make decisions. C, you are trying to get on the birth certificate. D, inability to pass on inheritance rights and social security benefits to the child. So we also have to think of this differently, as why tonight we're talking about civic engagement and male engagement, because the system is working circles around us. So this report, Kenneth, where can people get access to this information and your report?
So so the easy place to go grab it is fathersincorporated.com, and then you go into the menu and you hit free resources, and you just type in legitimation and it comes up and you can download it for free. But I also want to say this, Jason, about engagement, particularly when it comes to voting, because I've been doing a lot of like research and trying to make sure that I have my research and my numbers right before I start publicly talking about what I want to talk about as it relates to Black men voting. And so historically, there is a 10% differential between how men vote and women vote across all cohorts except for Asians, and they're about 7%. But historically, we all vote the same, meaning white men vote 10% less than white women, Latino men vote 10% less than Latino women. So that is even across the board.
Wow.
Where black men are failing, and I hate to use that word, but it is to a certain extent, is that we have lower levels of registering to vote when we are eligible.
That's good.
And because of it, so those of us who go and vote, meaning men and women, the differential between how we vote is the same, but the quantity of men who are going to vote is lower. So we're not showing up in the polls because we're not registering to vote. And a lot of it comes from how we have distorted who is eligible to vote and who isn't eligible to vote.
That's
If you
good.
have a misdemeanor, the first thing they say is if you have any kind of record, you can't vote. That is absolutely not true. But we buy into very quick things and then we disengage and then we sit back and we wait for reasons not to vote. Black men will look at something as publicly talked about, at least with respect to our two candidates, and say, well, one of them has, done a terrible disjustice in locking up black men. Well, that was her job as a DA. Unfortunately, she was working in an area where we were. The same thing happened with Hillary Clinton when we tried to get her to talk about the Rockefeller drug laws, that they wouldn't respond to it. But instead of like understanding the moment and understanding how we got here and what is best for us, we get caught up in this narrative and then we make an excuse and say, I'm not voting her. I'm not voting for her as a result of that. If we were
That's good.
engaged in the political process, now we're getting back to what you were talking about, Jason, which is civic engagement. If we're engaged in the civic process prior to that, we go through the mechanisms to ensure that our candidates understand what is important to us through our voices, not our silence. And so when it comes to black men, the narrative has got to be one of the ways to strengthen our community and strengthen our families is your engagement. You have to civically engage. You have to fill out your census form. You have to register to vote. You have to volunteer. You have to mentor. You have to go to school board meetings. You have to run for
Yes.
public office. You have to be school crossing guards. You have to be coaches. You have to civically engage into your community in ways that's not going to give you a dollar value on the end, but it's going to strengthen your community and your legacy value as we're moving forward. And I don't know how we have that conversation and get more men to kind of understand that's where the issue is. The issue is for us right now is in your disengagement.
That's
Right.
right.
And we have to figure out ways to get them connected back to full engagement, not engagement when it's beneficial to someone. Meaning that the only time we talk about engaging men in the census is 3 months before it's time to do it. The only time we talk about engaging in voting is during presidential and gubernatorial elections. Only time we talk about volunteering is when somebody has an event and it's Thanksgiving. The only time we have these conversations is when something is right here in front of our faces, when we have to begin to start thinking about that civic responsibility is a holistic responsibility for
That's right.
all of us, but more specifically for men, and we got to find a way to lift that voice.
So listen, we actually have a way to do that. I purposely did not mention Friday because I knew it was going to be our call to action. Let me tell you guys what I'm excited about Friday. This is something that Kenneth and Fathers Incorporated has been doing for quite some time. September 20th, this Friday, is the Million Fathers March. I know this brother has told me that there are 68 uh, cities that are signed up. I want to say it's 70 because Waterbury and Hartford, Connecticut are signing up. I know that for a fact because they are literally emailing me right now. But if you are listening to this, this is the call to action because on Friday, some of the schools that I've talked to just in my travels over the last week and a half, brother, they are excited. They have men coming in to read. They have brothers coming in to talk about their careers. They have brothers coming in to talk about storytelling and the importance of family and community. Like so many, they got brothers coming in to build bikes. Everybody is doing something different. I want to give you some time and space before we close out to talk to people about the Million Fathers March that is coming up September 20th, this Friday. I know people can get signed up at the website. And also want to give you some time to talk about Black Dads Count.
So the Million Fathers March is actually celebrating its 20th year. A good friend of mine, Philip Jackson, out of Chicago, rest in peace to him, started the Million Father March, some 20 years ago when I was still in New York. And in 2019, I believe it was 2019, 2018, unfortunately, he passed away. But before he passed away, myself and a couple of other friends went to Chicago to meet with him. Philip Jackson used to be a school superintendent in the city of Chicago. And while we were there, just to go and love on our brother, because he had just gotten out of the hospital, and talk about, his thoughts about his legacy, the things that he built. Jason, one of the things that he built was what he called a community PTA. Like in the city of Chicago, he created a PTA that was separate from the PTA, but it was a community PTA that the community operated and ran in the city of Chicago. But in addition to that, he started the Million Fathers March. And one of the reasons that he started the march was to begin to start trying to find a way to encourage fathers to come back into the school. And so it was twofold. It was, we would do the work to amplify the day itself, to get fathers to the school, and then we would encourage the schools to engage these fathers when they show up. And so when they come to the school, they should do things like the PTA should have a sign-up table out there. Mm-hmm. They should be giving the dads that are coming to the school calendar. They should be talking about how to get through security and making sure that they understand that when they're not on records, and having full engagement, offering volunteer opportunities to them and engaging these dads when they're in school. Do you know that there is research out there that talks about how the disciplinary issues in schools decrease the more male involvement you have in the school, or more male presence you have in the school? That's why it's important. I know you're on this thing as well. It's important that we encourage brothers to become teachers, that we encourage them to become coaches, that we encourage them to be in the building, that we encourage them to come to games. There is actually a safety mechanism connected to male presence in schools. I believe that if more fathers were in school, it would reduce the amount of school shootings around the country.
You're right.
Because there would be a disciplined environment in the school that would curb that behavior. And so the Million Father March is now in, you almost hit the number, we're in 75 cities now.
All right, okay.
The country. They self-report how many children they expect to impact and how many dads they expect to impact. This year we're looking at 28,000 dads and about 135,000 children that will be impacted by that day. The pandemic kind of hurt us a little bit. We're trying to get back to our peak numbers. At our peak numbers, we were in 124 cities across the country. And when I say cities, there could be multiple schools in the city, and we have 4 cities to which the entire school district is involved, like APS, Philadelphia School District, Fort Worth, Dallas School District, Baltimore School District, and major school districts around the country that are also involved as well. So the numbers can't really be quantified, but our job as an agency is to highlight the day, promote the day, organize the day, and deploy the day, and hopefully that the work takes place on the back end. And then lastly, Black Dash Count was an effort that we started in 2020 when the U.S. Census was struggling with specifically getting Black men to fill out the census report in hard to count communities. And we engaged with them, created Black Dash Count to begin to go around barbershops, particularly in the state of Georgia, but across the country, encouraging men to fill out the census forms. And it kind of went dormant after the census was over. And we have decided to relaunch Black Dash Count, but relaunch it in a way. When we called the Black Dash Count back in 2020, what we were saying is from a census perspective, Black Dash Count. Now we have flipped it a little bit to say that from the civic engagement perspective, Black men, Black dads count. We matter. We're essential. We're important. We're,
right.
we're all of those things. So we count. We count. We count. And so we thought that this would be the perfect time to relaunch this, to begin to start talking about dads' voices. That if your voices aren't being presented in the way of voting, then you're not being heard, and you have a personal obligation to uplift your voice by using it and civically engaging in the voting process this November. So those are those two things, and so you can find out about the Million Fathers March at millionfathersmarch.com, and you can find out about Black Dash Count at black-count.com.
Awesome. And that's the perfect way to close us out this evening for the premiere of season 6, centering civic engagement, Black male engagement. We have some phenomenal conversations coming up this season, but you have to stay tuned and subscribe to Educational Entities. Everybody join me in thanking Kenneth for being our guest this evening. Please drop any questions, anything that you may want to ask. This will be replayed again for people to get connected. But Kenneth, I want to thank you for the work that you do. And I also want to say this. I believe by the time we check in on Wednesday, there will be 120 cities that are connected, because I know that those who are listening, major shout out to Maritza, who is in Philly, Dana Williams, who is connected throughout Georgia and in the Charter School Association. I know she's going to send this out to schools and encourage them to get signed up. To Tanya, to so many others who were on making comments, share this out. Again, this is information to help us build community. And again, this phenomenal organization, Fathers Inc. Kenneth, we thank you. I do want to say that Fathers Inc. again is a major partner of our work. We are also impacting the school teacher pipeline. I will definitely tell you guys this in one more second before I go to final thoughts. As we do the State of Grandparents report on the 19th, the grandfathers are already like, we showing up at the school. Some of them are cooking. I'm trying to get to as many of the local APS schools as possible, because I know our deacons get ready to show up and they want to cook, but they also want to read, and they want to really kind of stay throughout the day. So some of the principals are like, hey, we are welcoming the granddads, the uncles, the fathers, the stepdads, the mentors, the tutors, the paraprofessionals, the after-school program directors, the coaches, Black men, biracial men, Muslim men, fathers of all walks of life are engaged. Please don't get it twisted. This organization has proven to us time and time again that they are. So please make sure we hype up the Million Fathers March. 120 cities, y'all. That's what we claiming by this Wednesday. Make sure you get connected. Again, Kenneth, thank you so much for being on. Everybody, this is the return of Speak Black Man, Season 6. Now, listen, y'all already know. I have to show you this before I go. Season 5, I said when I started the podcast about 5 years ago, by the 5th season, I wanted to come out with my first book, Suit, Swag, and Success, talking about male engagement. It's super dope, y'all. I'm not just saying it because it's my book. Make sure you get connected. We will be back on next week. Phenomenal conversation at 7:15 p.m. In our closing, I would say, again, make sure you get connected to the Million Fathers March. That is the call to action. Every show is ending with the call to action. Everything has been laid out for you. Please make sure you go to Fathers Inc. Website, Black Dads Count, Million Fathers March. We want to increase male engagement. So again, Brother Kenneth, one more time, we want to tell you again, thank you for being on again today. And we're getting some preliminary numbers from the podcast from YouTube, and we have actually gotten 22 new subscribers this evening. So again, I know that has a lot to do with people wanting to get connected to more conversations around this, but wanted to say thank you because that also reinforces the importance of this work. So again, people are getting connected, but also people want to see our brothers, our fathers, the men in our community thrive and be successful. So I had to make sure they brought you back on for that update to make sure that we said thank you to your work again and for all the phenomenal things that are coming up. All right, everybody, we are closing out. I want to say that we are more than a dream. We are more than a stereotype. We are more than fear and anger. We must share our stories, lift our voices, and speak Black man. Until the next show, everybody, peace and love, and we will see you then.